Hello, my darling, and welcome to today's story time. Today we are reading Armageddon 1970 by Geoff St. Reynard. It was written in 1952 for Imagination, Stories of Science and Fantasy. In the background, I have some ominous space music for you. And now, on with our story time. Chapter 1. They tried to kill Alan Rackham about an hour after he'd seen the accident. They bundled the job. They shot at him from ambush with an ordinary automatic pistol as he was walking up to his house. And Brave, who had a sixth sense for danger which had never failed him, knocked Alan over at the very instant of the shot and sprawled across him, a great solid shield holding him down and protecting him despite his angry wrigglings. Brave's grenade pistol was in his hand before the two of them hit ground, and he sent 4 quick shots at the bushes, spaced so that the tiny hot fragments tore hell out of 30 yards of shrubbery. Nobody yelled or groaned. Brave waited a full minute, and then he rose cautiously so that Alan could sit up and brush himself off and swear as he spat out dirt. They went into the house, and Alan reported the assassination attempt to his immediate superior, Dr. Getty. After that, they didn't try again to kill Alan for some time. The accident had been uncanny. It happened in the room where the shells of the silver-colored discs were fitted together and welded, before they were sent to the gargantuan baths that half-melted them again to re-chill them into solid masses of metal, which nothing short of a direct hit by a blockbuster could crack. A welder, using one of the newly developed torches that made the old ones seem like match flares by comparison, dropped it accidentally. Its flame licked up and sprayed across the man's right hand. It melted the protective glove like ice cream on a stove, crisped away the skin, and liquefied the flesh, charred the bones black, and left the welder no more than half a palm and 2 fingers before he could jerk his hand out of the terrible blast of fire. Alan and Brave were standing about 12 feet off, and there could be no mistake as to what they saw then. The welder turned off his torch with his left hand. He held the remains of his right hand before his face, turned it, and stared at it, the blood coursing in little sluggish streams down the forearm, the charcoal that had bones sifting off into the air, the flesh of a greasy yellow-red mass like candle drippings. And he shook his head slowly, an expression of annoyed mortification on his face. It was as though he'd cut himself while shaving, no more. He was simply piqued, when he should have been shrieking with horror and unendurable pain. Alan and Brave ran to him. "My God, man," said Alan, shaken. "Let me get you to the infirmary." The welder stood up. "That's all right, Dr. Rackham. I can go myself. This doesn't hurt." And then a curious look spread over his face, as if he had just recollected a lesson taught to him long ago. "It doesn't hurt much," he amended. "I guess it's cauterized so bad I can't feel it yet. Don't you worry, sir. I can make it." He walked away, perfectly steady, carrying the almost destroyed hand in front of his chest. Alan was so dumbfounded, he let him go. The welder never reached the infirmary. No man saw him again, alive or dead. So an hour thereafter, someone took a shot at Alan Rackham. Since Brave had witnessed the accident too, and because neither of them could account for the shooting except in connection with that strange accident, It seemed stupid and pointless for an attempt to be made on Alan's life alone, especially when a grenade pistol, one of those lean, evil handguns developed in 1959, would, with one shot, have cut an 8-yard wide swath and everything before it, and eliminated both of them. But there it was. They shot at Alan with an automatic. The bullet nicked across his chest and spoiled a blue coat that was practically new, and then they disappeared. Alan's house, which he shared with Brave, was a 4-room brick atop a knoll on the outskirts of the colony. It was a perfect bachelor establishment. The precipitron kept it free of dust, and Brave's innate neatness overcame Alan's careless disregard of surroundings, to the extent that dirty socks and unpressed trousers were not often to be met with lying in corners or hanging over the backs of chairs. Brave was also a good everyday cook, and Alan occasionally took a couple of hours off to chef up a New Orleans-style banquet for 2. The living room was lined with books, and the plastic-glassed-in lounge quarters in the rear held racks of pipes and a well-stocked bar. They were very comfortable there. It was only a 10-minute walk from Alan's laboratory and a 4-minute ride from the center of the colony. The colony was called Project Star. It was located on Long Island, protected as much as Oak Ridge had been in the 40s and 50s, then Project Bellana in the early 60s, with electrified fences and soldiers carrying the latest weapons, and a ring of grotesque machinery all around it, comprised of radar detectors and great ACAC guns, and a number of generators that threw up a kind of primitive, partly effective force field. The force field would stop any aircraft, or at least cause it enough trouble to slow it down for the guns. Of course, the artificial satellite, Albertus, named in honor of Dr. Einstein, kept a watchful telescope on Project Star. But in that year of 1970, it seemed to most men that all the caution and secrecy was overly dramatic. After the collapse of Soviet Russia a decade before, from internal causes precipitated by the successful fixing of the American-controlled satellite Albertus in the heavens, and after the almost Carthaginian peace imposed on Argentina when its dictator A-bombed London, the world had quieted down considerably. America was top dog in the nations, and her supervision of the science of other countries left little possibility of successful attack, or even of effective sabotage within the many colonies which worked on advancements in weapons and other civilized phenomena like spaceflight. Nearly everyone believed that the purpose of Project Star was to construct flying saucers. The inadequate name had stuck through the years, for use in reaching out to other planets. Only the men who were working there, and a few others in government and the military forces, knew that the discs were not intended for extraterrestrial flight. There were rocket projects galore for that, but for journeys in the atmosphere or slightly above it. At speeds incredible even in 1970, the name Project Star had not been chosen to mislead anyone, but it had done so, and nobody bothered to correct the impression. Secrecy had become an ingrained national habit in the past 30-odd years. Dr. Alan Rackham was one of the scientists who worked on the problem of fuel for the discs. He was not a member of the vastly important handful who headed the colony and came equipped with everything sacred and untouchable except halos. But he was considered of enough importance to rent a house of his own and an assistant who was also an efficient bodyguard. This was Brave, whose proper name was John Kiwana Watiwa. Brave sat down in his own chair, a sturdy, specially built job, while Alan called Dr. Getty on the visiphone to report the shooting. Brave never sprawled out or slouched as his superior did. He sat straight, a red copper-colored man built to the scale of a Greek statue, about half again in size. His arms and legs were tough as cable steel, his chest a brawny barrel. He was Navajo Indian, but his features were more nearly those of a Sioux. Great, finely formed crag of a nose, thin, straight lips over white teeth, dark eyes that a hawk might envy their piercing pallor, and a wolf-trap jaw. His speech was that of MS of Carlisle and Oxford, except when he spoke with people he did not know or like. At times, when he went with Alan to meetings of the hierarchy, a few of whom, including Dr. Getty, he cordially detested for their bland self-importance. He even wore a bedraggled chicken feather sticking upright in his black hair, stood behind Alan with folded arms and a fierce expression, and confined his remarks as a joke to himself. This gave both Alan and himself a great deal of innocent pleasure. For Alan Rickman was also a rebel against stuffiness and conceit. He was a perfectly normal-looking man, of slightly more than middle height, 31 years old, handsome enough, if you liked lean, bony features and unruly brown hair. His muscular development was so unobtrusive that no one ever guessed he had been a Marine, and won himself a DSC in Argentina. He enjoyed his work at Project Star, where he had a scientist's inquiring mind. But he liked even more the huge man with whom he lived, the girl in the metallurgy section who wore his engagement ring, and the book of rather impudent philosophy on which he worked during his free evenings. He also loved a long drink, a thoughtful pipe, an involved practical joke, and the moody Siamese cat, unquote. Now he turned from the visiphone as the image of Dr. Getty faded out on its screen. He frowned at Brave. "Son," he said, "why would anybody take a pot shot at me?" "Well, what does Doc Pomposity say about it?" rumbled the bodyguard. "Mainly, blah, blah, blah." "Naturally," nodded Brave. "You know, Sagamore. I think it's that accident. There is something cockeyed about it. I don't care how shocked the fellow was, or how quickly the flames seared up and cauterized his wound. There should have been plenty of pain in that hand. And he didn't even yip when it happened. He looked only peeved." "Getty says he never got to an infirmary," said Alan. "No one has seen him at all." "Cockeyed," said Brave again. "This whole thing's a muddle." He stared at Alan. "Boss, I have an instinct that warns me we're in for trouble." "That's an instinct?" Alan returned. "When I get shot at, this gives you an instinct?" "Hey, I have an instinct," said Brave, "which sits in his belly and beats on a tom-tom when trouble's coming. I don't mean ghastly wounds that don't make men cry out, or even lunatics laying for you thereafter. And there's a connection between the two, that's sure. But I mean big trouble. There's something in the air. I can't quite catch it. But it's been there for a long time. Weeks and months, boss." "No," said Alan. "You've been reading the thesaurus again. You know more synonyms for master than Roget. You mean this seriously, Brave? About trouble?" He had a respect for the man's intuition, which was based half on his anthropological knowledge of the weird powers of certain older races, and half on pure human superstition. At times when Brave made his predictions, Alan felt as though a gypsy crone had passed by him and whispered some incantation in his ear. "I mean it, boss. And the damned instinct has never been wrong yet. It's beating in my guts right now like it did at Campana, just before hell broke loose. Wow, said Alan. Battened down the hatches then. Hair on the back of his neck prickled and tried to stand up. It's got itself off to a fine start, your trouble. My tailor will never be able to mend this jacket. Why don't you cook us up some oysters, Rockefeller, and lobster thermidor, and all that Frenchified goop you brew up, suggested Bray. If we're in for afflictions, we may as well meet 'em with pleasantly full stomachs. Right. While I'm at it, you write a report of the incident, of both of them, and sign my name. Geddy'll never know the difference. He thinks you haven't mastered basic English yet. Ugh, said Brave. He said in the stereotypical Indian voice that people used in movies. Noble Red Man will inscribe little pictures on birch bark for Medicine Man. While Medicine Man raises cane and frozen food locker. Don't get that sauce too thin this time, patriarch. I can't bear watery sauce on my lobsters. And this, my darling, ends our story time for today. As always, I hope that you have very sweet and creepy dreams.